Rob, great job on Saturday. Yeah, it was good to see Cisco. Yeah, it was great. When I told my wife, I said ooh la la to him, she just goes, oh, I'm sure he hears that everywhere he goes. Exactly. Yeah, thank you. Exactly.
Took over your seat.
Exactly. Okay, everybody ready? All right. Welcome to the special city council meeting of the City of Federal Way for October 16th, 2018. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, welcome. This is for purposes of a study session for solid waste survey results and procurement process feedback. So we'll start off with Rob Van Orso, our solid waste recycling coordinator.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, council members and mayor. I'm Robert Van Orso with the Public Works Department. I work on solid waste programming and recycling programming. And the presentation tonight is going to cover the results that we obtained through the solid waste survey that we conducted recently, and also talk about, it gives us a good introduction to some of the service alternatives that we'll be looking at as we get farther into the procurement process. Just to give a brief overview of the presentation, we're going to have a request for proposals in conjunction with Council Resolution 18740. And that will provide firm costs for providing the various services. The proposals will also provide costs for alternatives. For example, the base contract may look at providing curbside recycling on the same schedule it is now, which is every other week, whereas the alternative would be to look at providing the service on a weekly basis. Presumably, that will cost more, but we'll have a firm cost of how much that will be, and a decision will be able to be made based on those costs. We're also going to be seeking industry review from the hauling companies prior to issuing the request for proposals, so that we get all their input on this as well to help inform the process, make it a more robust process, make it an iterative process. A little more background and a few milestones here. The resolution authorizes going out to this competitive process. The slideshow shows, this slide here shows some of the major milestones that we're looking at. City Council will be able to provide input of the internal review contract so that by December, we'll have a base contract and service options in place, and we can go through that industry review process. Proposals will be prepared by April of 2019. Then the evaluation process will occur. Then the award of the new contract, and that'll lead us up to September 2020 when new services begin. So when discussing this resolution, the City Council directed staff to conduct a survey about solid waste services. The survey results are summarized in the next dozen or so slides. Here's some stats about the surveys. We had 134 responses. The vast majority were single-family residents. We also got a lot of comments, which was great, get comments from our residents. We have about 20,000 customers in total in our customer base right here. So we're looking at a relatively small sample. But these survey results do provide a snapshot of what ratepayers value. And the survey is a great way of introducing the service alternatives that we're going to be looking at tonight as well. So let's get to the survey responses. The first question was related to service priorities. Here's how respondents rank them. Most important to least important. People rank priorities from 1 to 5. So cost was obviously the top priority. Respondents also value reliability and customer service, which are closely related. Respondents placed a little bit less value on expanding recycling programs or keeping the same schedule. Those were a little bit lower in rank. But regarding scheduling, garbage, compostables, and recyclables will continue to be serviced on the same day. That will be set by the base contract, just for sanity's sake. The next question related to mandatory garbage. In this case, mandatory means requiring people who generate waste to sign up for service. Respondents showed a strong support for this approach. I think part of that is due to most of the surveys that were filled out were by people who already have garbage service. That's what the stats showed. So of course, they value having that service. But it's an interesting result to see. The idea behind mandatory garbage service, there's hopefully some pros about it. That may reduce illegal dumping. It may result in lower rates if you have more route density, more customers signed up. But some of the cons are that it's not really going to help reduce the workload code enforcement when it comes to issues where people are storing up a lot of debris on their property, and it's not going to really impact litter at all. There will be some enforcement costs involved with it, and we'll probably get some people who are not very happy with the concept. And we did get comments to that effect in the survey. People were saying, hey, don't make me sign up for a service I don't need. I'm a self-hauler. It works good for me. So,
Rob, the deputy mayor has a quick question.
oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. I was just asking if we could ask questions at this point. How many cities around us have mandatory garbage?
Auburn has it. And I'd have to look at, I have actually a chart, I don't have it with me, but it lists all the different cities that have it. But it's important to note, Auburn has it, but they also have a water utility. And so they require you to sign up for water service and garbage service because the city runs that utility and they have their own billing system. So they have a lever, it's literally a lever. They can turn off the water if you don't sign up.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
So that's, it helps support their utility. It helps
Yeah.
make sure everybody's paying for the cost of a shared utility. So for them, that makes a lot of sense, but we don't have any direct billing capabilities here at the city. We don't bill for utilities directly. So that's a little bit of a setback for us when it comes to looking at this.
What percentage of our property owners have garbage service through Waste Management?
Well, with the customer base right now, we have about 18,500 single-family style customers. That would be customers that pay for services directly. So they're not condos or multifamily or businesses. So 18,500. And the data shows about 2,500 potential additional accounts could be signed up. So that's about, citywide, about a 90% sign-up level. So that's pretty good, 9 and 10. If the city does choose to require mandatory, it would change how that group, that 10%, manages their garbage. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about this
Okay.
mandatory stuff when we get
Thank
down
you.
into the next section. Okay. The next question that we had responses to was related to bundling yard waste service. This service alternative would bundle or embed the cost of yard waste into everyone's curbside garbage service. This is the same as the recycling cart is embedded in. So when you sign up for garbage service, you get the recycling. This would make it so that you also get the compostables collection as well. And it was kind of surprising to see this level of support by residents. Bundling the yard waste into the base rate would help to drive rates down, which could be worth exploring in the process through getting these proposals, because cost came in as the number one concern. And the way it would do that is by diverting more compostable materials away from disposal and to the composting facility. That would drive the cost of that service down, because disposal costs are about double what the cost is for compost processing costs. So there would be the proponents would be able to say, hey, we can put less resources into determining how we're going to pick up the garbage. I mean, they still have to do that, obviously. And more resources would be going into a lower cost section of the utility. Theoretically, that could decrease rates. So, and again, that leads us back to that whole cost issue. A following question was about every other week garbage service. This is a question about changing the garbage collection schedule. Service schedule is a little bit puzzling for some people. If you're used to weekly service, why would you not do it? But customers in Tacoma, Olympia, and Renton have this form of service where garbage is actually collected on alternate weeks. So it does work. And the reason why, again, we would look at it would be as a cost savings potential. The pro side is that under the column that says potential here, where you have every other week garbage collection, essentially you're reducing truck traffic trips through neighborhoods by 25%. So that means lower operating costs. You still have to collect the same amount of material, but it's a lower operating cost overall. Lower operating expenses means lower costs. So if we looked at an every other week schedule, it could be a potential way to lower rates if we get to a point where there's some sticker shock when we see the proposal pricing on everything else. So that is kind of how Renton ended up adopting it. It's because they went through a process and it looked like it was going to be pretty spendy, and so that was one way to mitigate for it. So we can go ahead and get the information about this, the real cost data, through the RFP process. The con side is, or the negative side is that the comments show that people like weekly service. You know, people are concerned that, hey, it's going to lead to all sorts of issues. So that's very understandable. You know, people don't want to have unsanitary conditions. They don't want to have odor. But it is a potential. So it's something we'll keep in our back pocket and see where it goes. We also asked a question about which new services the respondents would like to see. Maybe a little hard to read, but litter services was a top player there. Adding more materials to the recycling was also an issue. And we also have lowest possible rates, again, getting back to that cost concern. People like the idea of bulky item pickup. Some people are really happy with the way things are. Some suggested we increase recycling schedule for curbside recycling to weekly instead of every other week. And then bringing up the rear was recycling drop-off and a storefront concept. Some of the other ideas that comments were provided on were to have, for example, occasional cleanups of seasonal large yard waste volumes, make it easier to order a smaller temporary dumpster for our residents. There was concern about cost in the comments. People asked for more drop-off recycling services, free drop-off recycling services. And one I like, they want the rate structure to encourage more recycling, and that's kind of the way the rates are set up as it is now. So through the RFP process, we'll be able to seek cost information on litter service, bulky item collection, and changes to the materials accepted in recycling. People want more benefits and services, it's clear from their comments, but they also want lower rates. So we get it. We have this dichotomy where people want more stuff, and there's a little bit less enthusiasm about paying for it. Comments also suggested, requested, I guess would be the word, free drop-off recycling options. And one thing we can note is that there's a state-of-the-art recycling facility at the Bow Lake Transfer Station near SeaTac, and a similar facility is going to be built to replace the Algona Transfer Station. And that is going to not only have state-of-the-art recycling center, but it'll also have a hazardous waste collection site where people can drop off hazardous waste for free. So it'll kind of make a one-stop shop. The new Algona station will be under construction about the time the new contract kicks in. So we probably could, it wouldn't be a bad idea to let the county do their business and get that facility going. And it's something that everybody in the region will be able to use, benefit from. So I was just going to pause a little bit and just state that we're not looking for final decisions at this point. This is a study session, and several choices are going to be made once we do the evaluation process next June. And most of the choices that have a cost associated with them, that'll help us to reach decisions. Council members will also be able to weigh in by reviewing the internal review draft of the of the contract and the RFP packet itself. We should have that ready by the end of next week, so that'll be in your email boxes. But before focusing more on service alternatives, does the council want to comment on the survey, or are so far so good?
Council, anything? Councilmember Sefa Dawson?
Yeah, question. I think you kind of touched on it, but the proposed review, the evaluation committee, who's going to be on the evaluation committee?
At this point, it'll be a staff committee. We've got the Public Works Director, E.J. Walsh, myself, Mark Orthman from the Attorney's Office, Sarah Bridgeford from Community Development, Human Services, and of course, the most important person, Jeanette Brizendine, will be on it as well. How can I forget Jeanette? So, yeah, that's the group that we've corralled them in so far. They haven't run away yet, but they don't know what they're all going to be assigned yet either. But that's the group that's going to be doing the core evaluation.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask
Of course.
another? So with the litter service, how does that work, or what does increased litter service mean then? Additional?
We'll touch on that a little bit more here, but basically what we would do through the process would be to set up what we're thinking about now is two different approaches. One would be to service some garbage receptacles. We already have some garbage receptacles downtown. The idea would be to add additional garbage receptacles that the hauler would end up servicing, and they'd be responsible for installing and servicing those. So we could put in a set number of those and probably be in the downtown core area. The second alternative, which we'll touch on as well, will be to kind of replicate the existing landscape and right-of-way maintenance approach that we do, where there's several arterials that are serviced as part of the landscape maintenance contract. They also pick up litter doing that process. And so we'd actually have the contractor cover or staff that function so that they're providing that. Neither of those are going to cover all of our needs for litter control services. They'd be supplemental things, but other cities have done some similar things where they have the hauling company collect the downtown area garbage receptacles, and they also have the hauling company collect litter and do litter control as part of their contract. And there may be some efficiencies of combining that into the contract, into a larger contract. So it's something I think it's worthwhile exploring.
Councilmember, are we done? Councilmember Duclos?
Ron, thank you very much for the presentation and the write-up here. I'm concerned about the low number of surveys that we received. Can you tell me how that went, how you sent them out, or how you contacted people?
Sure. I have a little material right here, actually. Oh, it's in the middle. So we had a poster at various city facilities, plus postcards that we also distributed. And that basically, provided people with the instructions of how to log on to get to the survey. We also had a half-page ad in the Mirror that prompted people to respond to the survey. We had a banner on the website that asked people to respond. And we had paper copies at the CD counter where people could fill out the survey and leave them there for.
I'm just wondering if on some of our electric signs, if we shouldn't have had something about the survey and how people could get to it, because this is a real low number, considering the amount of people here that have garbage collection. Thanks, Rob.
The banner in the paper was a really good idea, as was the half-page ad. I think that's a really proactive thing, but I know it is tough to get people, and maybe it's an indication that they're really satisfied with their service.
It could be, but, still, then they could have said that
Right.
on the, if they'd filled out the thing, they could have said, we like our current service.
That's right.
But I think next time, in your reader boards, those electric ones we have around, we could use those more
Okay,
effectively.
good idea. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Last week, when they had the natural gas fire, and you informed people that there would be garbage service on Thursday, did you use the same way to inform people?
Actually, we relied on Waste Management. They have an out dialer program. So if you have your phone number registered with a company, either your mobile number or your home landline, you'd receive an out dialer giving you instructions. They sent out instructions the day before saying services weren't going to be provided, and then the evening of, they also provided supplemental instructions. So that was at our direction that they do that.
Okay,
I know,
thank
Rob,
you.
oh, sorry. I was thinking the same thing, and EJ doesn't know this, but I literally picked up the phone to call him, and then I realized, to make sure that was going to, that we were going to notify folks, and then I encountered some of these notices, and I thought, oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And they were very good about getting that word out.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
okay. Council, any other questions or comments, or?
I was going to just to go on to the next section, if
Yes, sir.
that's okay?
Okay, sorry.
All right.
Yes.
Unless we want to cut it short.
No, no, no.
Let's keep going. I mean, you're all here. This is so exciting. It's garbage. So anyway, we talked a little bit about this already, and I appreciate the questions that you've just asked about the survey. Let's look a little bit at what the draft contract's going to look like and what some of the service alternatives are. I grouped them into three different components, and this kind of reflects what's in the memo as well. There's some contract changes that are going to happen that are just smart changes to make because they have economic benefits or else they're convenient for our ratepayers. There's some service alternatives that may have a rate impact, and we'll explore what the costs are. Again, getting back to that cost issue. And then there's a couple of topics that we'll look at some industry review alternatives about. The base contract updates include, there's a couple dozen of them actually, but the ones that kind of rise to the top, we're going to be tying the administrative fee to the gross receipts. That will allow the administrative fee to track the size of the utility as infilling and the economy grows. We're looking at embedding business recycling services, similar to how multifamily recycling is fully embedded. That way, there'll be recycling services will be covered in the base garbage fee for businesses as well. Customers will get bulky items collected for prices that are in line with the prices charged by King County at their transfer stations. So that'll be a reduction in cost. We've looked at doing an extra yard waste collection after windstorm events. In other words, people would be able to set out up to 2 yard waste extras after a city-declared windstorm event at no extra cost. That will help clean up the city. The trucks are going to be out collecting the materials anyway, since people have yard waste carts. So that would help people to recover from when we have a windstorm or a freeze event where we have a lot of limbs come down and whatnot. The strike terms in the contract are going to be updated, so they're much more in the ratepayer's favor. It's going to be providing automatic credit for services not received, penalties that increase as the time goes by to kind of try to bring this thing, if it ever happens, to an end. And the contractor's going to have to do a better job of informing the city about how the recovery and contingencies are working out, and also report accurately on who's getting serviced and who isn't getting serviced. So that's kind of an outgrowth of the experience we had in 2012 when we had a labor issue, and we felt like our hands were tied, and it was frustrating. So that's sort of a reaction to that. The other thing that we're looking at updating is how annexation areas would have service extended to them, just in case we ever have that happen, where we get an annexation. So it's good to have that in the contract and have it clear how that will work. Here are a couple of the service alternatives that we're looking at potentially doing. One would be spring clean scenarios. In this situation, people would be able to set out a set amount of debris and or a couch and or a chair and or an appliance. And we would price it at 3 different levels through the RFP process, 2 on-call collections a year, so whenever the ratepayer wanted it, they would be able to receive that service, 1 collection per year, or else the third option would be just during a spring clean week, which would just happen at one time. So we'll get pricing information on that. And this gets back to the litter control question that Councilmember Yosefa Dawson asked. Essentially, the two bullets there are servicing right-of-way receptacles. That would be in the downtown area, mostly in the core, but there are some in the outlying areas along 320th and whatnot. And then looking at litter collection services in addition to that. And litter collection services meaning the typical collections that are happening now through the right-of-way landscape maintenance agreement. Where we're going to seek some industry review input would be on that topic of mandatory sign-up. Find out information about what the haulers think about every other week collection. That's going to be a potential cost saver. Looking at some recycling alternatives. We could potentially look at a local storefront concept. And then we're also looking at what I'm calling the recycling reset. And that's really to either see how the contract pricing would be affected by changing the targeted recyclables that we now collect, or determining how to share market risk so that rates will come in lower. And the idea would be that when rates recover, ratepayers would benefit from that. So it would be more of a two-way street, but that's one of the other areas where we're going to be reliant on industry review to get us a solid RFP packet. And of course, industry review is going to be, we're going to be requesting that they provide inputs and suggestions on all facets of the contract and the RFP process itself. Okay, so getting down towards the end here, the next steps, like I said earlier, we're going to prepare the draft base contract and the RFP instructions, and council will be able to review those. We'll be seeking council input and also doing the legal review process that time. There'll be an authorization to seek proposals. It's planned for the LUTC meeting and then going to council on the 20th of next month. Then we'd engage in the industry review process in December, finalize the RFP and the base contract, and start the process in January of 2019. So are there any questions about the various service alternatives or input that will help to improve the process?
That's a very clever graphic. That's really fun. It took me a second.
Thanks to Jeanette.
Oh, very good. Okay. And for those who can't see it, it was a series of garbage bags in the form of a question mark. Very good. Council, any other questions? Councilmember Yosefa Dawson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. So with export restrictions, can you explain to me how that would or could potentially impact service delivery in terms of all these recycling especially?
That's a question that we could talk about for a long, long time. And it's a great question. So the gist of my viewpoint on this is that we should continue the course, stay the course. We've had market conditions that are worse than the conditions, at least as far as pricing goes, in the last 10 years is what we're seeing now. But the market export restrictions to China really did shock the system. Luckily our current hauler waste management, they foresaw this and they came up with alternative markets. They have not disposed of any recyclables that they collect. And they have a huge incentive not to dispose of recyclables because of the avoided disposal cost. It wouldn't make sense to process something and then bury it. So it's a good question, and I'm wondering if you can frame it so that I can get more of an answer to you that you want to hear.
So you kind of touched on it, the China issue is definitely one. So I don't know how well they're prepared for it if it were to take place, or in terms of the recycling, whoever is going to respond to the RFP. So could that even be part of the question we're asking or putting in the RFP to see how they're going to address?
Yeah, for each different hauler's ability to market and process recyclable materials, that's going to impact their pricing. So we know that going in. And we also know that China is, consumers are consuming mills in China are seeking more material. So there's pressure to get more material back into the system in China as well. So it's early days. But I think we're in the middle of this crisis, and by the time we're through with the procurement process, we'll be a lot more close to the end of the crisis, and we'll see a lot more stable markets by that time.
So we're expecting they might address it in the RFP.
Yes.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think they'll be able to determine whether or not they feel they have the capability of marketing the materials and processing the materials. And then I also mentioned earlier that we'll be looking at potentially doing some risk-sharing options so that recycling revenues would be actually allotted, and then based on a set factor, we would be able to know how much revenues are being generated within a given period of time, and we'd be able to do a makeup either higher or lower within the rate base to offset either the costs, the additional costs of recycling, or else have the ratepayer reap the benefit when markets recover.
All right, great. Council, anything else? All right, thanks, Rob. Well, we're going to have, well, let's see if we have got any public comment. Is there any public comment? All right. Exactly. Thank you, public. Exactly. Darn it, that's my line. Okay. All right, council, that's all we've got. Sure there's no other questions, or Rob is always available to us if we have any questions. And Rob, thank you for all the work you've done. How long have you been with the city of Federal Way?
24 years.
Wow. Thank you for your service. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Great job tonight.
We do have the reception, the Arts Alive reception at 6 o'clock. Okay,
Yeah.
just remind you people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.